Matt Solomon's going to talk about nuclear in Colorado and just different sort of nuclear issues as we sort of think about different sources of energy, and he's going to fill us in.
Kirby, thanks for having me. Commissioner Sampson, thanks for including this topic today, and thank you all for sticking around to the last presentation of the day. I'm going to try and be practical and efficient so we can all get to dinner. I'm not going to talk about nuclear as a source of energy. What I'd like to present is the progression that we've gone through over the last 4 years from where we were to where we are today when it comes to nuclear energy. And we're not on the screen. Perfect. So this timeline shows back in 2022 when the Northwest Colorado Energy Initiative was started, Senator Rankin started it initially to conduct a feasibility study on a transition from coal to nuclear at the Craig Power Station. In 2023, House Bill 1247 passed and included nuclear energy in a feasibility study that the state planned to conduct over the next 2 years. That feasibility study completed this past winter, but we pivoted in 2023 from conducting a feasibility study of our own to ensuring that the communities were a part of the state's feasibility study itself. And as you can see, the progression has gone. Each of these incidents that led to a DOE response this year was not isolated. They all built on each other. And it's all done through engagement, policy, and readiness. And that readiness is what brought us here today. So engagement. We started by listening. What are the community's thoughts? What are their concerns? We conducted independent studies and analysis so we could find out exactly what it is and how to articulate and how to understand what the impressions were in the communities of nuclear energy as a standalone and how it fits as a whole with everything else. We were surprised. 88.5% support for nuclear energy in Northwest Colorado. The interesting part about this study was there was a 10% increase in favorability when people were presented with facts and truth, not advocacy. While that was going on, there were siting discussions happening, and the conversation expanded to talk about the full life cycle of nuclear energy. Policy is the big shift in the state of Colorado. As I mentioned in 2023, the state's feasibility study, that completed this winter. In 2024, there was an effort to define nuclear as clean energy. It did not pass. In 2025, it did. Nuclear checks every box of clean energy. Getting this passed shows one key thing. The blockade on nuclear is political, it's not technical. But in Colorado, it's defined as clean energy today. Also in 2025, Senate Bill 120. Senate Bill 120 was a workforce bill intended to set up a community made up of educational institutions, industry, communities, and the idea was to upskill and reskill our workforce, create apprenticeship opportunities, and help pave the way towards nuclear jobs moving forward in Colorado. That bill came out of the Senate and got stalled out in appropriations in the House. Some of the county commissioners might appreciate that the statement was given was they didn't want to pass a bill that wasn't funded. It was funded by pledges from foundations and industry, but that's another story. So that bill came back in January this year. Two key things about that bill this year. One, there was an amendment added to it, adding recognition for the full life cycle of nuclear energy. There's a theme happening, and this theme is happening in a very organic fashion. The second key thing is this bill came out of the Senate with a unanimous vote. I can probably count on my hand how many bills came out of the Senate unanimously this year, and that's one of them. It's now back in appropriations, and it needs your support for it to get through appropriations. This bill has pledges again from industry and foundations to fund the committee, not out of state dollars, but privately. Next Wednesday, House Bill 1337 gets introduced to committee. House Bill 1337 is sponsored by Representative Valdez and Assistant Minority Leader Ty Winter. This bill addresses a key need in our state. Right now, there is no point person that understands the industry that can function as a liaison between the feds and the communities, between industry and utilities. There's nowhere. There's no funnel of information. So we have a bridge between Pueblo and northwest Colorado that's come about, and we have two regions working together, but we have no functional aspect at the state level. Now, there's things attached to this bill that enhance some of the centralization of permitting and regulation that have been talked about earlier today. If we can get it amended, it's a fantastic bill, but this goes to committee on Wednesday. Let's talk about readiness. Last year, Club 20 passed a resolution supporting the full life cycle of nuclear energy. There's that word again. And this was a year ago. The key thing about this resolution is they support everything from research to waste management. The other key tidbit that I pulled out of their resolution is they're looking at the long-term viability in Colorado. Not today, not tomorrow. Let's look at long-term and let's look at the full life cycle. And this was adopted in September of 2025. This isn't a discussion. This is an example of what readiness looks like. And this is key to showing the industry that we are open for business as a state. And it's also key to showing the feds that we want to do business and we want to participate. Which leads us to where we are today. Remember Senate Bill 45, they added that amendment addressing the full life cycle in the workforce bill. On January 28th, the Department of Energy announced a request for information for nuclear life cycle innovation campuses. They wanted governor-led responses from states across the country, of course, showing that they support the full life cycle of nuclear and they have the drivers in place to do so. Southern and Western Colorado submitted a 149-page response on March 30th. On April 1st, the governor submitted a letter endorsing that response. That came about because of engagement, policy, and readiness. All three pieces came together for that response to be successful, and it's now being reviewed by the DOE. Industry and market signals, industry support, letters of support for that RFI. We have industry people engaging with our legislature, engaging with our communities, wanting to set up shop. We've got workforce opportunities. We have companies wanting to set up training centers in Colorado. We have new mines opening this year. Colorado has experience with the full life cycle of nuclear energy going back 80 years, and now it's come full circle. So on the immediate horizon, legislative action I've talked about next Wednesday. That's a key bill to watch. But this is something I'd like to focus on, integrated energy systems. Look at what Kirby's put together today. We've talked about oil and gas. We've talked about geothermal. We've talked about demand. But what hasn't been talked about is how do they integrate together? Because each of these topics, each of these sources of energy is a pillar on the house that we live in. And the either-or conversation needs to stop yesterday. We need to stop talking about how solar is better than oil and gas and is better than coal and is better than nuclear for all these reasons. And on the other side, nuclear is better than solar for all of these reasons. What we really need to look at is how do they work together for our benefit, for our children's benefit, and for our community's benefit? Because each one of these, geothermal, nuclear, solar, wind, coal, oil, gas, we all supply something to the system, and we all have a place to fit. So we have a presentation at Jolt in Grand Junction on June 18th on integrated energy systems. We have folks from the national labs and from industry on a panel to discuss it. Also happening today, the Club 20 Foundation has announced an energy impact analysis. This analysis is being done through Purdue University's energetics lab, and it's taking all of the energies that I just mentioned and that we've talked about today, putting them on the same scale and doing an apples-to-apples comparison of each over a 60-year life cycle. What's the long-term impact? What's the cost per kilowatt? What's the environmental impact? What's the plan for storage and waste? What's the carbon emissions? How can we use that data to help our local communities make energy decisions for the long term, not just for advocacy today? So that's an important study that's coming about. What are the next steps? Not getting the hook from Kirby for running late and keeping you guys from dinner. We've got to have continued coordination among stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I'm referring to policymakers, that's community leadership and state leadership, industry, and communities. We need to make sure that they're all aligned and working in a common direction, and we've got to be strategic in the sequencing of our next steps. That means we need to do the right thing, but we don't need to do it right now. We need to do the right things in the right order at the right time. And to do that, we've got to be coordinated. And that's what I've got for you today, because energy does build energy. And I'm happy to take questions. I'm also happy to let Kirby release you to dinner. I leave that up to you. Thank you.
All right, with that, I guess we're to Q&A. Hand you my microphone right here.
Of course I have a question. Matt, thank you. This is Wendell Koontz, Delta County. While this isn't coal mining, uranium mining's a close second in my heart. My question for you is, what's next for the DOE? How are they going to evaluate all this information they've now gathered, and how do we distill that to the communities, particularly in western Colorado?
It's good. So are you referring to the RFI responses that were just submitted?
Correct.
So there were, I believe, 20 or 24 responses. I can't see far away. It was easier to present not looking at you. Now I have to see you. There were 20 or 24 responses submitted to this RFI. And of those, I've been told 6 or 8 are considered Tier 1 responses. When the governor endorsed the Southern and Western Colorado regional response, I was told it got bumped to that Tier 1 category. Now, what they're doing and how they're analyzing it, I don't know. What I do know is there were 23 specific questions that they asked in regards to the life cycle. Everything from multi-industry support like data centers to mining to back end, how are you going to address the back end of the cycle? Reprocessing was a big part of that. I think we're going to hear back sometime in July or before July on what states they're going to negotiate with and what paths they're going to take. The response from Southern and Western Colorado did not commit to a specific site. Now, states like Utah, I drove through Utah last week, coming back down from Idaho. Probably 15 minutes after you cross the state line, there's a huge billboard with a bundle of bananas on it. And of course it caught my eye because they don't grow bananas in Utah. And right next to the bananas, it said, you get more radiation from this bundle of bananas than you do from a nuclear power facility. Then there was another one. You get more radiation living here at altitude than you do from a nuclear power facility. And I called a friend of mine that's doing work with Utah and asked him if he's behind it. And he laughed and said, yep, wait till next week. We've got TV and radio going out. Utah is on a full sprint to educate their state on the facts of nuclear energy. And they pumped a lot of resources into that RFI response, as did Tennessee and several other states. So the fact that Colorado's done their part to keep a seat at the table is really impressive. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, sir.
Matt, Michael Clancy, City of Rifle. You referenced a lot of legislative actions that are being taken at a state level. Can you talk a little bit about the culmination of those actions and how they're impacting the overall environment?
How do I do this diplomatically? That's the question. So is everybody familiar with the Clean Heat Plan? Clean Heat Plan is a piece of legislation coming down from the state. What about the Clean Energy Plan? It's completely separate legislation. When you look at it, it has nothing to do with the Clean Heat Plan. Is everybody familiar with the fact that the PUC sunsets this year and there's discussions to expand the role of the PUC? 3 completely separate bits of legislation that we're all watching independently. Well, I made the mistake of putting our data centers to use, and I plugged into AI. How do these 3 bills relate, and what's the long-term impact of this? And what came out was a full map of the consequence of these 3 individual bills and how they're interlaced. And what happens is the legislators lose their ability to set policy. All permitting and all policy gets funneled through the Energy Office and the PUC. Local controls out. All discussion around it is out. Unless you're in the pinhole of what the Energy Office and the PUC want, that's the end result of these 3 bits of legislation. Now, the interesting thing is with 1337, I can't rewind back, there's a piece on 1337 that says this nuclear liaison or this office in the Energy Office will be responsible for permitting nuclear energy applications. That was the flag that went off in my head when I read that. It's like, why would they attach permitting to a liaison in the Energy Office? So I started digging deeper, and that's what came of it. It really does behoove us, no matter what industry we're in this room, to pay attention to the legislation coming down the pipeline this year, because there are long-term impacts and long-term repercussions. Commissioner?
Yeah, good afternoon, J.J. Fletcher, Mesa County Commissioner. My question would be, I was doing a little research real quick. You look at the state of Arizona, you look at their energy portfolio. They started building their nuclear plants in the 1980s. Their portfolio is 45% natural gas, 27% nuclear, 13% solar, 8% coal. Through collaboration, what can we learn from the state of Arizona? And maybe you're already working with the state of Arizona.
No, but you just supported my case for an integrated energy system, right?
Sure. That's right.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. What's the balance? And the balance for Arizona might not be the right balance for Colorado. But unless we let go of our prejudice and unless we let go of our either-or thought process, we're not going to be able to find that balance. So I'm not a nuclear advocate. It's funny, I kind of became the nuclear guy because I was nuclear inclusive. And 4 years ago, the very first conversation we had at AG&C, we referred to it as the N-word. We didn't even use the word nuclear. Not for about 1.5 to 2 years. But we wanted it to be included in the conversation, not put aside and not focused on as a sole source. So that's a good point. Thanks for making the case. Kirby, I think folks are hungry and they're ready for a beer. Thank you all very much.
Might be. Thank you very much. That was awesome.